just before lunch, we started to have this kind of conversation in the room, you know, questions emerging, people from cross-sector having conversations. It's almost like the agenda was kind of planned that this was going to happen, because this next session is our ambassadors on the stage talking about cross-sector collaboration and how starting something within the sector can be arduous, but actually joining forces together and collaborating across the different sectors really can help to really fast charge the growth of this movement. So we have got a panel of experts from different sectors that are going to join on the stage. Alistair is going to chair this panel discussion. So I'm delighted to welcome up to the stage Marcella Boyle from Hymans Robertson Foundation, Ilaria Albanese from JP Morgan's Force for Good, Peter Proud from Forit, Alicia Clyde from Glasgow Caledonian University. Please, everybody, give them a massive round of applause.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you to our panelists for today. As Graham mentioned, we have a group of representatives from across different sectors of industry who... I'm to use this. Okay, good stuff. Thank you. As Graham said in the introduction, we've been very fortunate to have the support of a number of leaders from different sectors across industry and academia as our Tech for Good ambassadors over the last 2 years. So the session that we're going to be going into now is to start to draw out from each of those sectors what are some of the examples within the sector of what people are seeing in terms of Tech for Good activity. Are there any examples of collaboration within the sector already? And very importantly, from this perspective, what are the opportunities for collaboration across the sectors? Very briefly, from the far end there, we've got Peter Proud, who is the founder and CEO of Forit, which is a technology company based in Edinburgh. Peter has an extensive background in the tech industry in companies such as Accenture and Microsoft. So welcome, Peter. Alicia, back by popular demand, is actually standing in for her colleague Fiona Stewart-Knight, who has served as an ambassador with us for the last 2 years. Unfortunately, she's detained elsewhere today, but we're delighted to have Alicia join us for this conversation, so thank you very much. Marcella was introduced as the CEO of the Hymans Robertson Foundation, which she is, but that's only one of many hats that she wears across different areas within primarily the third sector. So I know you also work with Skills Development Scotland, Social Investment Scotland, and a variety of others, too numerous to mention, but great perspective across the third sector. And finally, we have Ilaria Albanese from JP Morgan. Ilaria is also standing in for one of our ambassadors, Felicity Goodman, who unfortunately is not well at the moment, so isn't able to join us today. But delighted to have you with us, Ila. You've obviously supported this event before and been very much part of the JP Morgan Force for Good programme. So I think I'm contractually obliged to say the word ecosystem at least 15 times today. So I'm going to keep going with that theme because it really is a very important part of what we're setting out to achieve in really all the work that we do nowadays. I talked about some of the partners that we work with in establishing the Tech for Good Alliance. And there are great examples, and Sheena, for example, mentioned a collaboration that we were involved with which did span business, academia, and volunteers. So tremendous opportunities that we can dig into here. So what I'd like to start off with is just asking each of the panelists to talk a little bit about what are the areas of activity they see within their sectors. Importantly, what is it that they personally are passionate about in those areas? Because, I was talking earlier in the opening session about the importance of tapping into people's passions. So we'll start off with that, and then we'll move forward into a discussion more broadly about the potential for cross-sector collaborations. So Peter, if you wouldn't mind, I'll maybe start with you in terms of within the tech sector. We've given some examples in Microsoft. We had some of your former colleagues, in fact, in the room earlier, a really good example of that. But there's quite a lot going on. So we're interested to get your perspective in terms of what you see within the tech sector of companies engaging in a tech for good sense.
I mean, I think it's important, what you're passionate about. I mean, when I was a kid, it wasn't until I had a milk round I realised that people actually lived in houses that weren't joined onto their next door neighbours. So I was brought up in a kind of quite a rough council estate in Dunfermline. called Abbey View. And, so the thing I really care about is being able to, social mobility, so being able to get poor kids and kind of get them into jobs and education. So kind of I talk a lot about inspiration, aspiration, education and opportunity. So on the back of that, I've got good relationships with colleges and universities. So I've taken 16 kids that grew up in a similar background to myself, and we put them through university. So that's something that we really care about. So we put them through an apprenticeship program, graduate apprenticeship program. So the first 11 have graduated. So they've had 7 firsts and 4 2-1s out of the first 11. So it's pretty cool when you get somebody coming up and hugging you saying, "Thank you for changing my kid's life." I was like, well, I actually charged them out at quite good billable rates, so actually it works for both of us.
Everyone's a winner.
It's a win-win. So I think that's something that we've done a lot of. And then we send the kids back in. I call them kids, right, because they're like my kids. The kids go back into schools to talk about it, and then we've actually heard somebody who said that they'd been into our offices as part of a kind of day release work experience thing, and they always want to work there. So it's kind of nice to hear that. The other thing that we've done a bit of is help startups. So I had a bit of space. What's a space? It was just a room. But I managed to find, and this is a good lesson for anyone thinking about doing startups, we found a couple of kids out of School of Informatics, so 3 pairs came and joined us. So Varun and his partner came. We had them for 3 years. They started 2 Big Ears. So we had them from day one from university, and then they sold to Facebook. We had an Almighty. They sold to a PE, and then Player Data, they've now got about 50 staff. So just from an empty room that I had in my office with a little bit of encouragement, a bit of help, and a nest, then that. So it's that kind of thing. So if you start to look at, how do you start a company, you don't have to give them necessarily lots of money. You just have to give them a bit of inspiration, a bit of space, and actually just give them the freedom to grow. And the other thing I really care about is social economic mobility. So kids that are poor, not poor, but I think one of the biggest problems in Scotland is poor kids in council estates who don't have any inspiration or aspiration. And I think if we could just give them that, then I think that's really important to help the nation get better. So that's kind of where we kind of play, helping startups and then trying to get kids into education who necessarily didn't have a path.
And from your time at Microsoft, obviously they've invested a lot in tech for good in one form or another. Were there any kind of aspects of that you saw that you think are applicable elsewhere?
Yeah, simple stuff actually. I had this PA called Patty McManus in Seattle. I was in Seattle for a while, and Patty, we had about 90 different countries in our team. And Patty had this desire to build some primary schools in Africa. And so we got 2 recipes from every country in our group. So we had about 180, 200 recipes. And we did the Geeks Gourmet. So we built a cookbook. And we sold it off Amazon, of all things, when you're a Microsoft employee. Why would you sell it on Amazon? The kind of dark side.
Because that's where people buy stuff.
I know, well. Yeah, no, but not profitable stuff, right? Like Microsoft, right? So anyway, I used to view revenue as profit as the same thing in Microsoft. But anyway, the cookbook sold enough copies to be able to fund 3 schools to be built and all the facilities for 10 years, right? So, but that was just Patty, who was a PA in the company, who had no one working for her, but had access to us and the Globe. The other thing that we did, I remember doing a presentation. I still remember this presentation like it was yesterday. I had this boss I didn't like very much, and he didn't turn up for a presentation while I was on stage, and he was meant to be doing another 45 minutes. So when you're in a room in Arizona and you've got a boss not turning up and you've got another 45 minutes to fill when you've not seen his presentation, it's pretty uncomfortable, actually, to be honest. This is quite relaxing compared to that. But at the presentation, I said...
It's still early.
Oh, it's pretty good. I know you'll be more gentle, right? So anyway, but what we did was, it was nets. It was mosquito nets for kids in Africa. And so we'd done a thing where we said we would match fund. So I just said, look, there's a bucket. If you put some money in, we'll match fund it. And I think it was £5 a net. They last about 5 years. 2 kids stay under them. I think we got about $30,000 from that presentation. So you get 30K and then you match fund it. And then actually we took it to the Gates Foundation. So I got 60, so that's 120. So you're able to buy 24,000 nets from that talk. It wasn't even that good, actually, to be honest, because 45 minutes of it was just...
The hourly rate was pretty good.
The second 45 minutes I had to just bullshit because I hadn't seen the slides, if I'm totally honest, which probably was the same as the first 45 minutes. But one of the things that big companies have got is scale. So if you think about that, 120,000, that's 24,000 nets were bought. We didn't send the money, we sent the nets because sometimes the money just didn't become the nets. And so that was, 2 people underneath it. Then you've got 48,000 kids for 5 years sleeping under nets to actually keep mosquitoes off you, so therefore it helps with malaria. And it's that kind of stuff that we should be thinking about. There's the stuff that you can do with your scale, but there's also the stuff you can do as an individual. Nobody asked Patty McManus to, build 3 schools in Africa. And if, if she had said, I'm going to build 3 schools, blah, 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 then you'd have thought she was crazy, right? But just by a simple idea, a 5-minute email to say, send a couple of recipes. At the time, Microsoft had Microsoft Press, so it was probably one of the biggest producers of documentation in the world at that point. So we were able to print the cookbooks and then flog them. So it's that kind of stuff that you can start to do. And I think that's the main message, right? Anyone can do anything as long as you kind of try, right? If you don't try, then you've got no chance of doing it. So I think that's the thing to do. Just do it, Kind of sound like a Nike salesman.
Well, we've had Amazon, we've had Nike. Absolutely, that's great. Thank you very much, Peter. And you talked about commitment to the graduate apprenticeship scheme. Obviously, Alicia, GCU is the largest provider of graduate apprenticeships in Scotland. How has that developed over time, and how do you engage with companies specifically? Because obviously, it only works if you have an employer who is willing to take somebody on as a graduate apprenticeship. So how does that link work, and how have you got to that scale?
Well, I think in the graduate apprenticeship space, we work with over 300 employers currently, and we're growing that as we go. So obviously those relationships are absolutely key. And the point about graduate apprenticeships anyway is that they're not transactional. They are all based on a tripartite relationship between the university, the student and the employer. And you can't support that person without that ecosystem around them. So our relationships with employers are absolutely critical. I think, some of my background before I came into education was working in non-profit, whether I was working for public sector or third sector. A lot of the work I did was in Europe, working on anti-discrimination projects for Roma communities, which are the largest minority across Europe by far. And what I learned really were 2 things. One that definitely echoes what you're saying, Peter, around the fact that we often think we can only make a difference if we do the big stuff, but it's actually small local actions that change people's lives. And the ripple effect of that is extraordinary when you see it in action. So you can go into something with very little money and with very little funding, but if you're creative with the resource you have, and you listen to what the need is and you support that need, you can make an extraordinary difference to a lot of people's lives. And additionally, the thing that I saw completely in action and really did give me that passion for education at whatever level it's at was the people, the people, and particularly a lot of the younger people that I met. We ran an ambassador program across 8 countries where we developed and coached young Roma people to tell their story to the media. And to do it in a way that meant they weren't a stereotype, to show that they weren't a homogenous group of people, that they had their own problems and their own solutions. And it was absolutely fascinating to see where in almost every case, even a tiny little bit of funded education was the thing that had helped somebody make a difference to their own lives, their families' lives, their future, had opened their whole world for them in a way that nothing else really could, and had maybe taken them on a step to something they never thought possible. And probably one of the most incredible examples of that was a young man from a ghetto in Bulgaria who had the opportunity to be part of a Roma Health Mediators program, which was about training Roma people to be health mediators for their own community and within their own community. And from that, and partly because his own parents had both died from heart disease when he was very young, he is now a consultant heart surgeon. And he is, you know, from the, and his own headline that he created was, "I'm from the ghetto. I'm now a doctor in the ghetto, and that's where I want to stay. I'm here to help this population change and understand, and to create better healthcare, to create better provision." It was never just about me. It was never just about what I wanted to do for myself. But without that one piece of education that took him on a path and then allowed others to see the potential in him, and then got him additional support, got him on a pre-med programme, supported him through that, supported him through medical school, he would never have been able to make the difference he could make. And I think, whilst that's a very different scenario to a graduate apprenticeship, it's kind of not in its simplicity, is it? It's very much about how can we take individuals and give them the best opportunity in life. And one of the things that very much stops people from taking on a university education is debt. It's not feeling that they have the opportunity to go to that next level of education. It's being told that they're not capable of that because of their background and because of the way they present in a school environment. And, you know, at GCU, we pride ourselves on our very high statistics of having a very large number of our graduates are the first in family to go to university. And on our widening access, you know, that's critical to everything we do. But the second part that's coming into that, and that is very much now a part of our new principles vision, is that we become Scotland's leading civic university. And that's about employers. That's about how we work with organisations, whether they're in private, third, public sector. We want to be connected to what you need, to what the economy needs, and to what those individuals need. So I think in terms of passion, it's odd when we talk about that, but I can sort of see where my path has been. And I never thought I'd be working in education. That was never a plan. And I've only been doing it for 4.5 years or so, but I can totally see why I'm kind of here now and why it's brought me to that place. So.
Thank you. A couple of things I'd like to pick up on from that. One is the impact of technology on education. So, you know, we talked earlier in the day about, you know, obviously the third sector had a real kind of impetus to start adopting technology as a result of the pandemic. Education sector the same, and the opportunity that technology presents to reach a much greater audience is fantastic. So you talked about the Roma community, for example. I mean, I'm not that well informed, but I do know that it's a very, very dispersed community across the whole of Europe. To what extent is technology playing a part in helping to reach that very dispersed community? Is that something that's already happening, or is it starting? Because, you know, you gave a great example of an individual from Bulgaria. You know, how did he get access into this kind of an environment and a program to help him to do that? And is that something that, you know, technology can help to scale?
I'm sure it can. I mean, I don't know the answer to that question. And there may be others in the room who are working with those communities in Glasgow and could tell us. I have colleagues who still are. I mean, I think that it's about, you know, you're looking, of course, there's that digital literacy gap. If somebody comes to this country having travelled through several others and having had an interrupted education, there's got to be ways that technology can support the development of that gap. And there have certainly been really innovative things done in schools in Govan Hill around getting permission from Scottish Government to completely flip the education curriculum and the way it runs in primary schools in order to accommodate children, not just from Roma backgrounds, but if you have a school that has kids with 54 languages in it, how do you teach those kids? If every single one of them has English as a second language or even a third language or a fourth language and has had interrupted education as a result of that. And one school in Govan Hill did some absolutely phenomenal stuff where they literally changed the curriculum round, and they ran Saturday schools and they did all of this stuff. But if there was an opportunity for technology to support that, because it's certainly true to say, you know, these are young people, they are digital natives, no matter what community they're coming from. They may not have lots of access to, they might have a phone, but they might not have data. You know, how do you process that? For example, we have a significant flagship project in South Africa with Transnet Freight Rail. They are a state-owned enterprise. They're the 5th largest freight rail company in Africa. The stuff they do is off the scale. It's logistics on a scale that us in the UK have no comprehension of, if I'm honest, until you see it, you think, what? But due to apartheid, they had significant issues with all of the kind of intellectual capital of their organisation being removed overnight, and not enough skill base in the company. And over the last 10 years, we've worked with them on a fully flexible work-based programme to ensure that they're not only their workforce is developed, but that it's also the intellectual capacity of their country has been, started to be replaced. And doing that in partnership with local organisations like the University of Johannesburg, doing it in partnership with professionally accredited organisations like the Chartered Institute of Railway Operators. But the problems and the challenges we have with that community, there are so many around tech. So, for example, the company does not automatically give everybody a laptop. So how do you teach somebody a master's level programme if they've only got a phone? If they've only sometimes got access, and particularly during the pandemic, to a laptop? How do you communicate with a body of students whose first language is not necessarily the one they're being taught in, and they don't have the tech to do it? And one of the solutions the team come up with was, well, let's create WhatsApp communities to have these tutorially based things. But then you, as an educational institute, you have to put the quality around that. You have to make sure that the academic process is still being followed, that there are protocols in place, that certain things are not discussed in that space, certain things are not okay. So it became it was a problem to solve, but it wasn't as easy as it looked. And I think if there were, mobile apps that could help us do that, if there were ways that we could, work with the tech sector to develop something really fantastic for that community, that would be such a powerful tool, and it wouldn't just be valid in that space.
I think the other thing as well is, sorry to butt in, and just tell me to shut up if
No,
you
don't.
don't.
No, definitely not.
I've probably bought 40 laptops in the last 2 months, right? So, and we recycle them back into Remakery. So I think there's a thing there for businesses to make sure, because the stuff, I like buy them because I like the colour sometimes, right, and then change it quite quickly. But we just recycle it back into Remakery. So, if you start to get some scale, because we're just a small company, right, I've only got 55, 60 staff. So if you take the scale of that and make sure that all the laptops that are leaving the businesses, because they only tend to last 18 months, 2 years, but they've probably got another 3-4 years worth of life for people in colleges and universities. So I think there maybe needs to be a big push to make sure that there's lots of things getting recycled back into education, into the third sector, through places like Remakery or whatever. That's just one we use,
Absolutely.
but there is.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing to think about there is, if you start to kind of get partnerships with people like Charles and Microsoft, you can sort of kind of build things on the heads of giants or the shoulders of giants. So, one of our apprentices saw, because we run Microsoft websites for education in 60 countries, she saw that we could make the language translation stuff quicker. So for her fourth year university project, she was able to reduce the time it took to take a website from English to the rest of the world from 3 months to 2 weeks as part of our project. And a company, so it's that kind of thing that you can start to use technology for. So it's quite smart,
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
And
Marcella, sorry. Ila.
no, I was just going to say, we've talked about the challenges, obviously, the technology brings to enhancing education, but from the experience that I've got from the projects that we've had through Force for Good, many of which even when they're not with educational organizations, so there are a lot of non-profits that do have education as part of their mission, or they educate the public about different areas. There has been such a massive increase in reach through technology. Organizations that were reaching 100 people with their in-person trainings now can reach thousands anywhere in the world. There is a level of accessibility from people that have mobility issues that now can access all of this material from wherever they are. There is a level of increased access from more diverse perspective as well. For example, people that spend a lot of time in their home, they don't have ways to travel, now can get their education through technology because of the shifts that we've had through the pandemic and this change towards a more digital first approach. So while there are, of course, a lot of challenges when there is that lack of access, once that access is granted, it is incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. And one of the pre-recorded discussions that we've been streaming out today was chaired by Robin McPherson, who is the principal of Robert Gordon's College up in Aberdeen. And they, coming out of the back of the pandemic, have launched an online higher computing science offering, because it's pretty well known that there is a real shortage of computer science teaching provision around Scotland, and especially to your point, Peter, originally about different communities, it's very skewed. Where you can get access to computer science education in schools is very skewed. So they're using technology to make this available online, fully online, teacher supported, to SQA qualification level, to people who, students in schools who don't have any computer science teacher there. So, it's definitely broadening access in that sort of way.
And I think just picking up on that, Alistair, there's so many points in all of this, and I do want to go back to Peter's earlier point about a large part of what causes some of the issues is around poverty. So we can't ignore that,
Yeah.
particularly in Scotland. But just picking up on computing science, there's fantastic, this point about Act Now. If you aren't aware of Digital Critical Friends, which is Scotland IS, Scottish Government initiative, which encourages anyone from business to partner with a secondary school who may not have a computing science teacher, or but the teacher actually needs some support in terms of refresh skills, etc. It is available online. We can share it afterwards, but it's a fantastic initiative to act now, particularly for some of the young talent who have that enthusiasm to bring into a classroom and really get young people encouraged and excited about what technology and digital can offer. So I would point that initiative out because it's scaled already and you can access it. But Peter's point about poverty is something that is exercising. I've been speaking a lot the last few weeks with quite large charity organisations across Scotland and the UK. And my passion is around skills, youth employment and communities, virtual and physical. And many of those charities have been commenting on the lack of funding that is now available. We all know it's a cost of living crisis. And where it hits public sector, it squeezes third sector. Funding that was available through European funds, this isn't a political statement, but it's simply not available now. And there were promises about what Shared Prosperity Fund was going to offer for UK and Scottish-based charities and social enterprises. That simply hasn't materialised. There are so many calls on that funding now. So what we are seeing, particularly in youth employment and youth employability programmes, even more need for businesses to get involved. So we know that hybrid working is here. And for many roles going into the new industry, version 4.0, whatever you want to call it, many young people still lack the digital skills that many employers are asking for. And it is about schools being supported, but it's also about employability partners like Barnardo's, Prince's Trust, Fair Scotland, all of Action for Children, etc. They're the ones that are picking up some of the failures in our education system. Trying to encourage young people to think about their future jobs. So if you aren't, again, Act Now, if you aren't involved in some local initiatives where you can really use your skills to bring on young people, these are short life initiatives. It doesn't have to be years of your time. It's typically 4 to 6 weeks. If you can offer work experience, if you can offer work inspiration type events, those are the types of initiatives and interventions we know make a difference to young people. Many of them will never have stepped foot in a Barclays-type campus. I can think about schools in Govan where the kids will be walking by thinking, well, that's not for me. So we need to think about how we raise aspiration. This isn't all bread, it's not jam tomorrow. We need to do things right now. So if your organisation isn't offering those types of opportunities, I'm focusing on young people, but this is all age. This is returners. It's over 50s. It's people that think that they don't have a future. So the furthest away, and technology can really help on that. So the people in this room, I would suspect, are already passionate about digital and technology. It'd be fantastic to see that converted into more activity and scaled up initiatives that are already there. You don't have to create it. Either speak to developing young workforce in your area. So it's Scottish Government funded. I'm involved with DYW and I would highly recommend it. Or come and speak to STA and we can make sure that people get put in touch with the right partners. But poverty is something that's not going to go away. And just finally, if you haven't read at the beginning of the week, Joseph Rowntree Foundation came out with fresh research in Scotland. It makes for really grim reading. And Rodri didn't apologise for some of the challenging messages that are coming through for third sector earlier this morning. That really resonated with me when he was talking about it. But there's 460,000 people in Scotland living in poverty, and over 46% of that are in deep poverty. So that's 40% of the national median income. We can all have our thoughts about whether that's justifiable and whether that's right in an economy that's supposed to be better for everyone. But most young people in those households will also live in poverty, so we need actually action now. So if there are things that your organisation can do to raise aspiration, primary school all the way through, I would really encourage you to act now.
Can I say something about the apprenticeships? Is that okay? So,
Oh, Peter, I thought you were going to come in after poverty.
yeah. Anyway, yeah, I know, but I know what it's like, right? So I didn't know what it was like to go on a plane until I was went for an interview, you know. So it was like when I was a kid. But anyway, that was a long time ago. But people think it's a big overhead to take apprenticeships, right? We've got a model now whereby we've got college relationships and we take people with HNDs. So we grab a kid that's got an HND, we put them through university. It's a 2-year apprenticeship. They start working with us 4 days a week. They go to university 1 day a month, and then we give them 1 day off a week to do their studies. You know, we've built a massive tool on the back of one of the apprentices, and then we're just in the middle of doing another one on the back of another. So we actually get something out of it as well with regards to the products. But it's really important. We have a kind of 60% success rate of keeping them, because obviously recruiters come in, you know, make them big promises. We can give you 65k when we're paying them 45 or whatever it is. I don't know if this has been recorded and streaming. I hope it is. But so we give them pretty good salaries for where they're at. So we kind of keep hold of quite most of them. But, you know, you've got to view it like an investment in your own future as your company. So we took our first apprentices when we only had 9 staff. It's not like you've got to be a big company. And so, you know, it's something that everyone should be doing. If you actually care about the future success of your company, you should actually be investing in it by investing in skills. Just give them good packages. We don't sign them up to anything like 2-year handcuffs. You've got to pay the money back if you leave, any of that nonsense. We just try and give them good jobs, private medicine, a couple of shares in the company, a bit of this, bit of that, and try and inspire them to stay. And if they stay, then that's good for us. If they don't, then it's good for them to get a job somewhere else. So it's not an overhead to people. Every single company in this country that is doing tech or whatever should have apprentices to actually help things going. I'm actually saying because I actually chair the Skills Development Scotland Apprenticeship Board, right? So I'm doing a bit of a plug there. But I think every single company should look at it, because other than starting this company, it's been the best thing I've ever done since you know, second best thing I've done in my career, start the apprenticeship, actually start my own company.
Great, thank you.
And I think that's where that multifaceted approach that we're here to discuss today comes into play, because obviously you can support young people by hiring them into your company and by helping them develop the skills. But as a company, you can also support them by supporting organizations that do that, because there are, as we've been talking about, so many initiatives that already support young people, that have already built the programs and have the dedicated skills and people there in place, or you could participate in those as well. But supporting those organizations as well as bigger corporations is another big step that we can take towards empowering those young people. So there is the supporting directly, supporting through supporting other people that support the organization, supporting as individuals by joining those organizations. There are so many ways in which change can happen, but it only happens in a tangible and substantial way when all of those pieces come together at once, rather than just disjointed as it tends to happen at the moment.
It just doesn't have to be young, right?
Of course.
We've taken some people, we took a couple of people out of the forces, so they'd probably been in the Army, one was in the Air Force for 10, 12 years. Their qualifications aren't relevant anymore, but if they're smart, they're smart. And one of the great things about the graduate apprenticeship scheme is the employer underwrites the entry into university. So you don't actually need the qualifications to get in, you need the capability. So we were able to get them in, even though they didn't have any qualifications to go into the natural stream. I don't know, that might have changed, but that's certainly what we
I think
Yeah.
recognition of prior learning and experience is a critical part of apprenticeships, and we have our youngest is 16 and our oldest is 60 on the graduate apprenticeship front. So yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you, Alicia. We are running out of time, and the fact that we've only just got started just is an example of all of the the potential and the scale here. Ila, if I can just maybe ask you as we begin to wrap up. I mean, we often hold up JP Morgan's program as a really good example of something which is a sustained investment over time. And we've talked about others as well. So Microsoft has this, others do as well. But within JP Morgan, it's 10 years of commitment within the organization now. You've been actively involved in that. What are some of the key things, as the company has grown that program? Because we were talking earlier about how do you get started, and that's certainly one of the things we're really keen to encourage. Ecosystem, did I say ecosystem? But, what have been the stages of progression, if you like, through the Tech for Social Good program within JP Morgan as you've seen it?
So I think, first of all, yes, it is actually a 10th year of Force for Good, which is an incredible achievement because that has been over 900, organizations that we've been supporting over the past 10 years. But there has definitely been a lot of learning through that process. And some of the key points are, for example, how important it is to look at the impact. So we've been talking a lot about the massive difference that an individual can make in a previous conversation, but what that comes to is how simple things can really make a big difference. In the initial conversation that we had this morning, there was the big gap between, blockchain, AI, all of the buzzwords, and where the social sector is at today. Understanding that the best solutions for those nonprofits isn't the flashiest, newest thing, but it is something that works and that works for a long time and that is sustainable for them was definitely one of those key learnings. There has been a basis and a pillar of this sort of program from the very start, sustainability in the long term, but that has definitely become reinforced year on year as we have seen how successful really simple solution can be for those organizations that simply don't have the resources to dedicate to technology in general and aren't even close to bridging the gap between where they're at now with paper forms and Excel and using AI and data science. So it is very much about focusing on the impact, focusing on the starting point and leveraging the skills that these organizations have, that JP Morgan has and other tech and broader, wider organizations have to support one step forward rather than trying to fix the whole thing all at once. There's 1,000 other things, but I realize we're out of time.
Thank you. So literally in 2 minutes, you mentioned the word sustainability there in terms of the solutions. And that's a really critical part of it because, sending in the hit squad that, piles in and does some work, and then when the smoke clears, everybody's left looking around, well, what happened there? That sustainability thing, what are some of the practices that you've seen that are effective, and literally 2 minutes, on sustainability of solutions beyond the point at which you've just handed it over?
Yes, so the first thing is to meet the organization and the people that we're supporting where they're at. If an organization doesn't have a developer in the staff, it doesn't make sense to deliver them something with custom code. They don't have the skills to support that in the long term. So it's understanding what skills do you have right now, and if there is a little bit of upskilling needed, then supporting that upskilling, but fundamentally trying to make sure that anything that is delivered provides as little disruption as possible while also giving as much impact as possible. And that comes with putting yourselves into their shoes, really understanding where somebody that doesn't have a computer science education is at with their technology understanding, and what kind of resources they have to dedicate, not just in terms of budget, but in terms of time, in terms of attention, in terms of how often something needs to be updated. Those are all key considerations that need to be made when adopting any form of technology, and that really are key to ensure that long-term sustainability.
Great stuff. Okay, well, thank you very much. We could talk for another 40 minutes very easily, and some really fascinating topics to take away. We've talked all the way through today about the idea that what we want to do is to generate activity to follow up. So we will certainly be sharing as much as we can in terms of references to the kind of examples that the panelists have been talking about here today. And so with that, I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking our panelists very warmly for their contributions. Thank you all very much.